Hey there Looma, this is the rib and purl headband and scarf pattern, and I'm Denise from LoomaHat.com. I'm so sure you're gonna love this set that I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into the supplies. You're going to need a 41 peg round loom, 236 yards of chunky yarn, a hook, a needle, scissors, a crochet hook to weave in your ends, and optional stitch markers. Let's begin with the headband. Because you guys always ask, I'm going to go ahead and review my stitch marker placement. I'm using rubber band stitch markers, and you'll see them in sets of 2. So where I'm starting, I'm using a different color, and so I stretch it over 2, then 2 are blank, and then stretch it over 2 more, and 2 are blank. I'm going to continue doing that again in sets of 2 until I get to the very end. My loom is an odd number, and so I end with 3 of them. On the rib stitch section, right, these are knit purl. On these 3, the last one, I will do an extra purl. If your knitting loom is only 40 pegs or it's an even number, you don't have to worry about that last peg. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and work on that U-wrap cast on, in my case of 41 pegs. So I'm going to take my single strand of yarn and use a simple knot to secure it to the anchor peg. You can use a slip knot if you're more comfortable, and the direction that you go doesn't matter. So take your yarn and put it between the first and last peg, and you can go left to right or right to left, no worries. And we're going to wrap every peg, so just like an E-wrap. From back to front, wrap the peg. And I'm going to use this cast on. You can use any cast on that you want. Remember that there is a rib stitch to this project, and so you want a little flexibility. Make sure that it's not too tight, but like I said, any type of cast on that you want to use is going to work right. Now we're on peg 1. All of our pegs are wrapped. I'm going to half wrap that peg 1, take the bottom loop over the top, and knit off. That is the U-wrap. Again, you're going to half wrap and knit off. Later on, I'm going to show you how to do an E-wrap, which is also part of this pattern. And as you guys continue on your cast on, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Carol Maple from PromiseLearningATL.com, Penny Pitchard, Barbara Ledger, Bob Urquhart, and Joanne Claybor for covering the closed captioning of this video. Thank you guys. Once you're done knitting off all of your pegs, then you're done with your cast on and you're ready for rows 1 through 5, where you're doing the rib stitch, which is a knit 1 purl 1 until the last 3, where you're going to knit 1 purl 2. All right, so back at the beginning, knit purl, right? Knit purl, knit purl, knit purl. You're going to continue to do that until the last 3. Get the working yarn, half wrap, and then take the bottom loop over the top. That is your knit 1. For your purl 1, take the working yarn under the existing loop. From the top with your hook, you're going to scoop up the working yarn to create a new loop. Take the loop that's on the peg off and put that new loop on the peg and pull your yarn to tighten the stitch. Got it? Next, you're going to half wrap the peg, take bottom loop over the top, knit off. Take the working yarn, put it under the existing loop, scoop up to create a new loop, take the existing loop off the peg, put the new one on, pull. All right, that is your rib stitch. You're going to do that until there's only 3 pegs if you have an odd number loom, or you're just going to continue to knit 1 purl 1 until the end if you have an even number loom. Well, right now we're working on the brim, and the brim is a rib stitch brim. All right, keep going. You need to do this for 5 rows. Once you finish your 5 rows of rib stitch, you're then ready for row 6, and all you're going to do on row 6 is E-wrap your 40 or 41 pegs. In other words, regardless of the number of pegs that you have, you're going to knit the row. But first, make sure you take the knot off the anchor peg. You have enough rows and your yarn is secure. So now just take your working yarn after you take the knot off and wrap every peg. All 40, 41, whatever number you have. Just again, from the back to the front, wrap each peg, which is now the top one, right? And then you're going to knit off. So take the bottom loop over the top. There you go. And keep going. You have all of your pegs. They all need to be knit off. Okay, once you've done that, you've done all of your pegs. You knit them off. Then you're ready for rows 7 through 9, where you're going to do purl stitches for all of your pegs. In my case, 41. You guys already know how to purl, so we're going to go kind of quick through this, right? So here I am on peg 1, scoop up, create a new loop, take the old one off, put the new one on, and pull. You're basically going to purl the row, and you're going to do that for 3 rows. So just keep purling and purling and purling. That's what you're going to do for rows 7 through 9. And once you're done with all those purls, then for row 10 you're going to wrap the row again. So another stitch you are more than familiar with, but let me explain. You're going to wrap all of your pegs. So from the back to the front, wrap your pegs, and once all of your pegs have been wrapped, you're going to get your hook and you're going to knit off all of your pegs, starting with the last one, bottom loop over the top, knit off. So one single row of wrap, and once you're done with that row, you're ready for rows 11 through 13, where you're going to do the rib stitch again, but this time your rib stitch is done with an wrap. So wrap 1, purl 1 until the last 3 stitches. Okay, so wrap that peg. You can then knit it or go to the next one and do your purl stitch and then come back and knit off, and then go to your next. You're going to wrap for your wrap and knit off, or go to the next one for the purl and then come back and knit off. Or one option that you have, you can wrap and knit off, or you can wrap and then purl and then wrap and then purl and then wrap and then purl, which I don't know, to me it works better and faster, and it might just be like a mind game that I do, but yeah, I find it's quicker to wrap and then purl and then come back and knit off all of your wraps. So continue your rib stitch, and then remember that that last extra peg that I have, which is peg 41, I'm going to do a purl stitch. If your loom is even, you don't have that, and then you can just knit off your wraps. And again, remember, I have a little spoiled brat here, and so he loves a squeaky toy. It's a little annoying, but you kind of learn to ignore it. Once you're done with that, you're ready for row 14, where it's just a row of wraps. And you guys are experts, right? You're going to wrap your pegs and knit them off. You could do a little bit at a time, or one at a time, or all at a time. The point is you're going to wrap. So wrap and then knit off all of your pegs. You're going to wrap the row, and then you're ready for rows 15 through 17. So it's 3 rows of purl. The set of 3 is always consistent. Hopefully you guys have noticed. That's going to be followed by 1 row of wrap, and I'm not going to demonstrate because you already know how to do this, and we're going to go ahead and move on, and I'm going to tell you the last 3 rows, which are rows 19 through 21. You're doing a rib stitch row again, using the E-wrap version of the knit stitch. And don't forget that that last peg, if you have an extra peg, you're going to purl that peg. And then you're ready for your basic bind off, which means that your head band is done. You're going to now, in another word, cast off. So we're going to be using 2 pegs at a time, and I'm going to go slowly and then go a little quicker and allow you a chance to just watch me do this. It's really cool and very easy. So the first set, you're going to wrap both pegs. Now you're only doing this with the first 2 sets. You're going to wrap them both, and then you're going to knit them both off. We're going to call them peg 1 and peg 2. You're going to take the loop off of peg 2, move it to peg 1, tighten that stitch, and you're going to knit off peg 1. You're going to move that stitch over to peg 2, and that means that peg 1 has been cast off, and now you have a new set, and this time you're only going to wrap peg 2. Then take that loop, bring it over to peg 1, tighten, knit off that peg, and then take that loop over to peg 2, and now those first 2 pegs, you've done the bind off, and you're ready for the next 2. You're only going to wrap peg 2, take the loop off, move it over to peg 1, knit off, move that loop from peg 1 to peg 2. As you notice, every time I finish a set, I have a so-called new set of pegs 1 and 2, right? And you're noticing that from this point on, I only wrap the second peg. You got that? So you wrap peg 2, you knit off, move the loop from peg 2 to peg 1, tighten the stitch, knit off, and move the loop from peg 1 to peg 2. You've done the cast off, and now you have 2 new ones, and you're going to repeat the process again. It's really easy once you get the hang of it and you understand what you're doing, which is exactly the same thing with 2 pegs over and over and over again until you've done your bind off, or in other words, cast off of all your pegs. So I wanted to make sure to show you these last 2 where you wrap peg 2, move it over to peg 1, which is actually the last peg you're going to knit off. And once you knit that peg off, pull on the loop just a little bit to release the project from the loom completely. Get your scissors and cut a long tail, which will help you work, and then you could just pull that loop out and you are done. Now what you're going to do is stretch your stitches. So you grab the top, you grab the bottom, and you stretch them, and that stretches your stitches. And you see how beautiful your knit stitches, your purl stitches. It's just a great looking project. Now you don't have to do what I'm going to do next. I just want to show you. You can leave your cast on loops as they are. They don't look bad, but you can help them to loop better. And you can do this by tightening your loops. Now I want to give you a heads up that I messed up this time, as many of you have done, and then you leave some really interesting messages because you get really upset that you finish your project. You went to tighten the cast on loops and you messed up. So I've been wanting to show you guys what is it that I do when this happens. And so here you see that my cast on is looking better because I'm tightening the loops. So I highly recommend that you do this. It is so worth the time and the effort. I can't emphasize that enough. And make sure that you don't tighten. If you're going to do this, you don't tighten too much, again, because this is a rib stitch and it needs enough give in order to function as a rib stitch. All right, so remember that these first ones were U-wraps, so they look a little different than the other sets, but I wanted them to be tighter, and that's why I mixed E-wraps, did U-wraps, and then did E-wraps. All right, so take the knot off of that cast on, and then you'll see that I am trying to pull on it, but it's not doing what I want it to do. This last one, which I pulled out, it should have worked, and I should have been able to just pull all that excess out through my last one, but for reasons I can't explain, it didn't work. So what I did is that I took what I had, which was which basically looks like a really long loop and then the cast on, and as you can see, I can't pull it through here. It's stuck, and that happens sometimes, no big deal. The one that's a loop, just cut it, and now you have 3 of them, so you tie it, and that's going to secure it. And I know that knots bother some folks. You are not going to feel this knot at all. And so there you have it. It's done. Now we're going to weave in the other end, which was the cast off. So I took a needle, and I'm going to, as you can see, put it through that last loop. And I'm sorry that I kind of went off camera, but I'm just basically taking it and going through the last loops so that it looks nice and neat and complete. Because if you don't do this, you end up with like what looks like you missed your last loop, and so that's why I do it. And then I take my strand and I go upward, and then I come downward, and it's just a way to secure it. You can go sideways, you can go up, whatever direction you're going. I always recommend that before you end, you go in the opposite direction. This kind of secures your working yarn, and that way when you wash the project, it's not going to fall apart. That's it. That's your headband. Cool, right? And done. You're just going to take this and just like I did before, weave it in. Now you can put the headband to the side, and we're ready to work on the scarf. For this one, you're only going to need 21 pegs. So if you like, you can get a smaller knitting loom. In my case, for consistency, I'm going to continue to knit with my 41 peg loom, although I'm only using 21. So I'm going to take my single strand of yarn, and like before, I'm going to secure it using a simple knot. You can use a slip knot, and I'm going to wrap 21 pegs. Now keep in mind that we're going to be knitting flat and not in the round. So once I finish wrapping my 21 pegs, I'm going to turn direction, and I'm going then in the opposite direction, because again, we knit this flat, not in the round. So here I am on 21, and I'm going to turn around, knit off that peg, and then start knitting my 21 my remaining 20 pegs, 21 in total. Once I'm finished with all 21 pegs, then I'm done with my cast on, and I'm ready for rows 1 through 6, where I'm going to E-wrap 1, purl 1 until the last stitch, and then that last one I'm going to E-wrap. So just like before, I'm going to go ahead and start right away. I'm not slipping that first stitch because I want the edge to have shape to it. If you want to skip that first stitch when you turn around to have a neater edge, you can do that. That's not the look that I want it, so I don't slip. I start with the very first peg, and I start with the E-wrap 1, purl 1 until the last stitch right here, and then I E-wrap. All right, and personally, I go back and I'm knitting off. Once you're done with that, you're ready for row 7, and for row 7, super easy. All you're gonna do is knit the row. As you can see here, I'm taking the knot off the anchor peg. Once I'm done with those rows, you can do that at the 4th or 5th. Once your yarn is secure, you don't need to leave that knot on the anchor peg, and in fact, you want to make sure you don't leave it, that you take it off with enough time. So once you're done with that one row of E-wrap, you're then going to do rows 8 through 10, where you're going to purl those 3 rows. As you can see, It is exactly the same pattern that we did for the scarf. Now, I'm sorry, for the headband. Now you're doing for the scarf. And you guys do remember how to do your purl stitches. So do 3 rows of those purl stitches, and then you're ready for what comes next. This row is super easy. Row 11, all you're going to do is wrap the row. So just like before, you already know how to do this. You're going to wrap and then knit off. And I want to say, don't be concerning yourself if you look at the row I'm at and I'm on a different side of the knitting loom. Don't worry about that. Don't get fixated on it. Not important. All right, rows 12 through 14, you're going to do that wrap rib stitch, right? E1, purl 1 until the last, and then wrap. So we're going to start. See that I'm starting on this end. If for some reason you notice that you're on the other end, it's not really that important, or as my daughter would say, it's not that deep. 1 row more, 1 row less. This pattern is very forgiving. It's not going to show up and be an eyesore. All right, now pay attention, because here is a key part of this pattern. Rows 15 through 20 to 224, you're going to repeat rows 7 through 14 28 more times. Now, this 28 more times of these repeats is for my scarf, which was 60 inches, or in other words, 5 feet. But you're going to repeat yours as many times or as few times as is necessary for your scarf. So to show you what a repeat looks like, here are 3 of the 28 repeats that I did, right? You see that it's exactly rows 7 through 14. And you're just repeating those in that order again and again and again. Now, what I want you to do is, once you're knitting, you should always be measuring as you knit if you don't want a 60-inch scarf, okay? And what you're going to keep in mind is that for every 4 rows that you do or don't do, that's going to adjust the pattern by approximately 1 inch. All right. So if you did what I did, then the next part is to do rows 225 through 27, which again are the wrap rib stitch. And your very, very last row will be a row of wrap. So let me slow that back up for you just a little bit. What I'm trying to tell you at the end is that regardless of the number of rows that you knit, the number of repeats of rows 1 through 14, whatever number that is, your last 3 rows are 3 rows of rib and 1 row of wrap. And then you're going to cast off. Because you are ending with a rib stitch, we're going to use the super stretchy cast off in this in the scarf, because I do want it to have some stretch, unlike the top of your headband. So you see here that this was the cast on, and so now we're going to do the cast off. So take the working yarn and you're going to basically measure out those 21 pegs a little more than 2 times. This is going to give you more than enough. And then you cut the working yarn. And for this case, you can use a needle or your hook. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the hook. So this is worked over 2 pegs. The first 1 and 2, you skip that first peg. From the bottom, scoop up the working yarn and feed it completely through. Then you're going to go back to peg 1, and from the top, you're going to scoop down and feed the working yarn through that first peg. Again, we're always working 2 pegs at a time. You remember we did that before? Different cast on, same concept, 2 pegs at a time. So now you're going to skip that first peg. You have 2 new pegs 1 and 2. You skip peg 1, go to 2 from the top, scoop up the working yarn, feed it completely through, go back to peg 1 that you skipped, and from the bottom you're going to scoop down. Your working yarn is on the top, so you're going to scoop it down and feed it through. Now you have a new pegs 1 and 2, right? In order to keep this nice and neat, I like to release the previous one that you basically finished casting off. Now we have 2 new pegs 1 and 2. So skip peg 1, go to 2, put the yarn under the existing loop, scoop it up from the top and feed it through. Go back to your new peg 1, put the working yarn on top of the 2 existing loops, and from the bottom scoop the yarn down and feed it through. I'm going to let you watch me do this a few more times. And again, I go back and I release the ones that are done, just so that I don't have such a stretched out cast off. I'm going to freeze the frame on the next one, because I want you to notice a little bit better what is going on. Okay, we're going to take these pegs one at a time. So this peg over here is where your working yarn is. The next 2 are the ones you're working with. So you're skipping peg 1 and you're going to work with peg 2 first. Okay, so take your hook, your yarn is under the existing loop, you're going to scoop up from peg 2, feed the yarn completely through, then put the working yarn over peg 1, and from the bottom you're scooping it down and feeding it completely through. And then you're going to release any one of these last 2. They're cast off, you're done. Try to keep your yarn, your loops as tight as possible. It's just going to make it look better. So now you're working these next 2. They're your new pegs 1 and 2. You may need to watch this again, or you might want to watch a video that's specifically about the super stretchy bind off. By the way, you can use another bind off if you're more comfortable with the basic bind off. Do that one. Again, this pattern is really flexible. All right, these are the last 3 that I'm doing. As you can see, I'm going to release that last one. Now I have 2, and my last 2, I'm just going to go right to peg 2 and feed it through, go to peg 1, feed it through, and then I'm going to come back and feed it through 2 again. That finishes my cast off, and you see that it looks really good. It has nice flexibility, and just remember to stretch your stitches out, and then you're just going to have to weave in your ends on your scarf and you're done. All right, weave in all of your ends, and then that's it. That's the set, guys. I hope you like this pattern as much as I do. Remember to come back, loom with me, share the video because it helps me a lot. Alrighty.